Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. A big thank you to Lonnie Mackler for joining us as well to share his story with us today. Um, as you can see, Lonnie is a CanScribe graduate, and he graduated with honors on May 5th, 2021. So thank you for joining us, Lonnie. And yeah, I'll turn the floor over to you, and you can tell us your story.
All right, thanks, Leslie. Good morning, everybody. As Leslie mentioned, my name is Lonnie Mackler, and I would say that I am not your typical medical transcriptionist. I, as she mentioned, graduated from CanScribe with honors on May 5th, 2021, and this is a little bit about my story. First of all, that picture that you see down in the bottom left-hand corner there is about 12 years old, and that's one of the other more important days of my life. That's when I got married. Anyways, all of my working adult life, I've worked labor-type jobs. I've worked in all areas of construction and finished my construction career as a finishing carpenter, specializing in cabinet making and kitchen renovations. When I was a teenager at the age of 17, I had to have back surgery, a discectomy, actually, to be exact. And this was to fix a disc protrusion at L5S1. As a result of this surgery, I have had back problems my whole life, and this has limited me tremendously. I am also hearing impaired with 70% loss of hearing in my right ear, and I am currently awaiting to have surgery to fix a cholesteatoma that is eroding away the bone, and I may never actually get my hearing back in this year. Now, in the summer of June 2018, I loaded my motorcycle into the back of my truck and I headed for Whitehorse, Yukon for holidays, where I was to attend a motorcycle ride called Ride for Dad, which is a Ride for Cancer fundraiser. I have typically made this drive in the past, usually straight through, and I live in southern BC. When I was approximately 5 hours away at a small town called Watson Lake, I started to fall ill. I was vomiting, had diarrhea, and my heart didn't just feel right. So from Watson Lake to Whitehorse, it actually took me 26 hours to finish the trip. And of course, there's no cell service in that area until you actually hit Whitehorse. I would drive for about 20 minutes, find a rest area, vomit, pass out for a few hours, and this went on until I reached Whitehorse. Once I arrived at my brother-in-law's place, I passed out once again until he got home from work from approximately 1:30 to 5:30. Once my brother-in-law got home, like a good family member, he made me some chicken noodle soup and I fell asleep once again. In the morning, I still didn't feel right, so I went into the emergency department in Whitehorse and they found me to be in atrial fibrillation. Now, before this all happened, I was diagnosed in 2015 with two large femoral DVTs in my right leg. And I also noticed that I was always tired and winded, but I never thought anything about it. I just thought, it was just the joys of getting older. At the time, we lived in a place called Falkland, BC, and we were renting a place on 40 acres. So back to my trip. When I arrived at Whitehorse General Hospital, like I said, they found me to have atrial fibrillation, of which I believe I had for a few years and did not know it. They told me that they needed to cardiovert me so that my heart rate would normalize, and so they did. And I can remember asking the nurse at the time to be straight with me and let me know what I was in for. And he told me it's pretty much like you see on TV where a person bounces off the table. So I went into it thinking, oh, great. I can remember waking up after the procedure and telling the nurse I was ready to go dancing, which I found hilarious because I am not a person to dance. After the procedure on the same day, they discharged me. Excuse me. I still was not feeling right. And then 2 days later, I noticed my right side swelling up. And again, I went back to the hospital. And once again, I was in atrial fibrillation. And they subsequently, and that's a word you're going to hear a lot, they cardioverted me again. This time they had to do it twice to get me into regular rate and rhythm. And I awoke saying, I love growing weed. And by this time, my dad was there and he was just laughing. So at this point, they admitted me to the hospital to do some tests. And I had some liver tests come back abnormal. On day 3, repeat tests came back normal and they released me once again. So by this time, my whole body was swelling up. I did not get to do the ride I had intended on doing in the first place when I decided to take my holidays. And I actually had to have my wife fly up to Whitehorse to help with the drive back, as I could barely even walk without feeling gassed. I could walk 10 yards and I'd have to stop. And it was fun. So it took us 4 days to get back home. I immediately unloaded my couch of a motorcycle and then we headed to Vernon, BC to the hospital there. And guess what? They found me in atrial fibrillation once again. And I got zapped once more. And this is where I started to go downhill. When I left for Whitehorse, I weighed 200 pounds. And when I got to Vernon, BC, I was 285 pounds. And I was retaining water so badly that it was leaking through my skin. I completely ballooned up everywhere. Even my scrotum was bigger than a softball, which I made fun of because I couldn't even sit on the toilet properly. And at this point, all I had left was my humor. I can remember telling a nephrologist, "Hey, I used my flashlight on my phone on my scrotum and it glows." At this point, I told him that science was fun, and he asked me if it was dark in color. He told me he told me that if it was dark in color, it would be a result of blood. And here I was just trying to be a smartass, and it was actually something that was kind of important. On the second day in Vernon Hospital, my GFR tanked to 6, and I was rushed to ICU. I can remember screaming as my wife walked into the room as two nurses were trying to insert a catheter, and shortly after, on that day, I was rushed to Kelowna General Hospital, where once again I was cardioverted 2 more times. And at that time, I found I was allergic to propofol, as I was apparently hard to wake up from it. Now, this is where things got really fun. I was diagnosed with congestive heart failure as well as kidney failure. My organs were really angry. I was placed on dialysis, and over a 6 week period, 3 times a week, they took a total of 60 pounds of water off of me. They did this at almost 7 pounds each time. I was told they usually do about a maximum of around 3 to 4 pounds. I was also once again cardioverted, but this time they used ketamine instead of propofol, and I did not like that experience. When I awoke, my wife was there, and I mentioned to her that she looked like Marge Simpson. At this point, I still wasn't getting better, and during the last 2 weeks, the hospitals that was working noticed that my platelets were dropping rapidly, and it was determined that I was allergic to heparin, and as a result, I developed something called HIT, which is heparin-induced thrombosis, and subsequently the heparin was discontinued. And before this happened, I was up to an astronomical amount of heparin as they kept bumping it up, trying to raise my INR levels to a therapeutic level. Once this was discontinued, I started to turn around and then was released at the end of August 2018, knowing that things were never going to be the same for me at that point. I could hardly walk when I was discharged, and at the time I had to walk with a walker. Now, before I went into the hospital, I was working as a laborer and I worked pumping out septic tanks. I wasn't able to return to this job as I could no longer do the work. I found that I was couch bound most of the time, and my wife and I decided to relocate closer to hospitals and other services in the event that something more serious could happen. So, February 1st, 2019, we moved to Lake Country, which is just outside of Kelowna, BC. At this time, I found myself falling just deeper into depression. I couldn't work, I couldn't do anything, and it was miserable. I was so accustomed to the outdoors life. We lived on 40 acres, and we would just hop on our quads and up the mountain we'd go right from there. So it was a big change for all of us. So I wallowed in depression for a year. Everything was on my wife's shoulders. She took care of all of her bills and her needy husband, and this also drove me nuts as I felt it wasn't fair. And I just started getting angry with the situation and at myself for not being able to work. And then one day I just had enough. I had to figure something else out that I could do. And by this time, I had developed a lot of social anxiety to accompany all of my social stressors. And I still suffer from social anxiety. And this is actually the first time I've ever spoke to a bunch of people. So I decided to go and talk to an employment counselor at Work BC. I started to do some workshops that they offered to try and see if I could find something that would fit with my situation. I did have a little bit of computer knowledge from my past. I grew up in the area of the Commodore VIC-20s and the Commodore 64 and, playing around programming with DOS and stuff like that. But I mean, that's as far back as my computer knowledge went. And that was almost 30 years ago. When I was a youth, I was very wild. I did not like going to school. Apparently, you have to go to school to pass. And in 2006, I had actually gone back to school and received a diploma in applied counseling and psychology. And I had intentions on that time on becoming an addictions counselor. However, I never followed through with it, and it was a $20,000 education that I never did anything with, and I was still working construction, and it was a safe area for me. I didn't want to go into something that was going to be a waste of money or a waste of time, as I had felt I had run out of both of these things. So one of the things that kept popping up with dealing with the employment counselor was medical transcription. So my journey went into research mode, and I started to research it. Now, I do know a lady that took the course at CanScribe, and at that time she was 65 years old. She's been working with Acuity Solutions for the past 5 years as an independent contractor, so I probed her a lot to see if this was something that I could do. She explained how it worked, and it piqued my interest. Part of Work BC's mandate is to research multiple avenues to achieve the same goal, and this is where I was introduced to CanScribe, and I got in touch with Deborah Shams. Now, keep in mind that I was not fast at typing at the time. I had not done well in school growing up as a youth, but I did have a little bit of knowledge gained through going back to school in 2006. I did not have any medical background whatsoever. I was as fresh as the driven snow when I started. It took me a bit to hit the 40-word prerequisite, and I did this over and over and over until I got it. Grammar was also another issue for me in the beginning. Excuse me. After I had been accepted by CanScribe, I was able to put together a portfolio for WorkBC, and shortly after I was accepted, WorkBC paid my tuition. It was still a struggle, as I didn't qualify for any other funding, as I had not paid into employment insurance for many years. So my education experience started, and I scraped enough money together to get a desktop computer. I hooked it up to a big 42-inch TV that threw so much heat that I almost got a suntan from it. And I did have to take a month off in the summer because I couldn't stand the heat, and also a very uncomfortable chair, and set off on my journey of learning. In the beginning, I was flying through the modules. I believe my module on grammar, I received 50%, and I thought to myself, how the hell am I going to be able to do this? So, one of my downfalls is I am truly my own worst critic, and I do tend to be very hard on myself. But I just took each module day by day, and when I got frustrated, I would walk away, clear my head, and try again. Now, as many of you may know, the Taurus is a cuff line, and it's designed that way. And it's designed that way, I feel, for a purpose. It's designed to help people hear those tough dictators, and some of them are exactly that. Uh, I always had a goal of getting a transcription, one that was graded that had no colorful marks in it, and I'm sure you all know what I mean by that. And it never happened, although I did get close. Um, as I mentioned, it's a tough course. I recognize, I'm sorry, I can remember when I went back to school in 2006, that course was also designed to make a person deal with their life issues, both past and present. In order to be in a position to be able to help others with their issues, you need to be able to deal with your own. So this always stuck in the back of my mind, and I felt it helped me get through the tougher days. But like I said, that was an education that I didn't do anything with. So throughout the course, I felt like I was up and down. Then I hit the surgical section and found that that section took me quite a while to complete. I found the research was actually fairly intense, and I did learn a lot in that section, and I believe that was the turning point for me. All of a sudden, the light bulb went on, and I found that I was starting to, quote, get it. Excuse me. And that's when I was starting to figure it all out. I started to do very well with each module and just kept taking it day by day, keeping in mind that each time I did, keep in mind that I do not have a medical background other than my own health issues, which actually did come in a little handy in some areas. Now, I have always been a big fan of lists. Put it on a list. If you don't do it, you won't do it. That's always been my motto as far as lists go. I had to learn how to use spreadsheets and found that's a little bit more time consuming than I liked, but that's just my take on it all. Also, I never used a text expander, and I wish that I had. I did this in thinking that it would slow down my speed as I was trying to basically learn to type again. And I found this difficult with having hands that don't listen to my brain very well. I can remember having a boss one time tell me that the hands are not hammers. I was building cabinet doors, and you try to just bang them over that 1/16th of an inch to square it up. And he was telling me this for a reason, and sure enough, I ended up having issues with my hands. So now all that brings me to my final week in practicum. I was very proactive and was all over Acuity Solutions as I wanted to work for them, as I had a bit of an in with one of their transcriptionists. One thing that I liked was that I did not have to be super fast with my typing, and so I took their test and I passed. However, I was hired on as a medical scribe, and I went through their training with their Acuity Academy, and I did have a tough time trying to teach myself not to just type what I hear, because in the course, that's how I kind of had taught myself. Um, but to be able to type in a shorthand format and then expand it all afterwards. I had trained myself to type what I hear, and so I did not pursue this with them any longer. Um, and I had health reasons for not pursuing it. I don't do well with stress. Stress sets my heart off, and I wasn't trying to make my situation any more stressful than it already was. Excuse me. So once I made the decision to look elsewhere for employment, I was hired with MetaScribes within 2 days, and I was posted at Michael Garron Hospital in Toronto as an independent contractor with them. I thoroughly enjoyed this position. I loved the acute setting that they offered. However, after 2 months, I learned that they were closing the Canadian operations. So once again, I found myself looking for work. Now, as I mentioned, I am not the average medical transcriptionist. I am a big guy. I have lots of tattoos. I have hair down to the middle of my back. And let's face it, society can be quite judgmental at times. So I enjoyed the anonymity that came with that position. Um, Now, once they closed their Canadian operations, I went on the search again, and this time I landed a job working for the Gastroenterology Associates group where I live, where I am one of two transcriptionists for 11 doctors and two IBD nurses, and I must say I love it there. I've been there now for almost 3 months, um, and there was only a few days in between going to each job, so I was able to find work actually quite easily. So I did have to learn a new software program they offer called Acuro, but I found it was easy to learn. And most of all, with this position, I'm able to work from home remotely, which is very important to me as I have mobility issues. And the only thing I need to worry about on my commute to work is walking into two dogs along the way. There is a ton of work out there for all situations. Over time, my personal goal is to hopefully get into the hospital setting, as I really enjoyed the acute setting. I do need to get my speed up with my typing. As I mentioned, I was barely able to do 40 words per minute before the start of the course. And I finished being able to do 63 words per minute, and I believe that I'm a little bit faster now. Um, Now, one of the things that really helped me through the course was purchasing two whiteboards. Um, and I have these two whiteboards set up beside my computer just to the right. And this is where I write all of my tough words or things that I felt were needed to succeed. For me, this helped save having paper scattered all over my office and was extremely helpful. As I mentioned earlier, I did have a tough time transitioning to being a live medical scribe, but this was because of my own doing. And if this is a path that people are looking at, and I do know that they are hiring 200 scribes each month, then I would suggest creating a list that helps a person take layman terms and being able to convert those into medical terms. So, something like runny nose, meaning rhinorrhea, things like that, and to also create some form of shorthand so that as the live setting is being spoken, you're able to create your own soap note of what's going on and be able to understand that soap note. And like I mentioned, I would type everything that I hear, and I didn't do any of that legwork as far as creating a text expander. I truly believe that if people wanted to become a live scribe, that's something that will two things actually that will ultimately help them succeed in that field. So once I started with MetaScribes, it felt like home to me. I maintained no lower than a 99.7% accuracy, and I truly thrived in that setting, albeit for only a short while. This was mostly a speech recognition program, so my typing didn't have to be super fast. I am able to read and figure things out quite quickly, so that was a big bonus for me. So my first paycheck, I set myself up with a dual monitor setup and got rid of my big 42-inch TV, and having a dual setup just absolutely cuts your research down. I would say more than in half because you can research, look over at things, and you're not having to go back and forth on the one screen all the time. Um, I do know that there are tons of employment opportunities out there. Um, I still have Indeed and things like that that send me emails daily, um, and and it's everywhere. I was proactive and actually started just phoning offices and trying to find, and speak to the office manager and probe them a little bit to find out what they offer as far as transcription is concerned. And that's how I ended up getting my job with colonial gastroenterologists. Truth be told, I truly don't know where I'd be had I not taken this program through CanScribe. All the research I have done, and I did a lot in order to get the funding that I needed. It showed that CanScribe truly does stand out from any other institution. I can't even make it through the news now without yelling at the TV because the captions that scroll along the bottom usually have some sort of a typo. Now, the position that I have currently is a straight standard typing position. There is no speech recognition with it. And with everything I learned from CanScribe, the transition was also easy. So, like I said, to summarize, this is one of the best choices in my life. The course was accommodating to both my learning style as well as being applicable to any situation in the job market that I have come across. And I would recommend it to anyone that may be interested in this field. Like I mentioned previously, it is designed to be a tough course. And there were some doctors at my posting at Michael Garron Hospital of MetaScribes that were extremely difficult to understand. And it was truly my education through CanScribe that gave me the confidence to succeed and be able to understand them. There is also a doctor where I currently work that has a very strong accent, and I am called upon almost daily from our other transcriptionists that works for them to help pick out what this doctor is saying. And I can honestly say that I have not had to send anything blank back with blanks thus far. So, I mean, this doesn't mean that it won't happen someday, but I believe it is a testament to the program and the depth that CanScribe offers. Another thing I will say is make sure that you lean on the instructors. That is what they are there for. This is something that I did not do. Um, just I don't know if it's a pride thing or why. I struggled and I tried to figure things out myself. And but when I did speak to the instructors, they were all awesome. They checked in with me frequently, and if I had any questions, I'd save them for that time. But don't do it that way. Lean on them. Don't struggle. It's not worth the hassle. So that's their job. That's why they're there. So, but having said that, it truly shows the ability of the program, and if it can teach this old biker, and I'm not young by any means, but apparently I am still trainable. It can teach anyone. My the picture that you see on the screen there, my wife got me that card, and it says, doesn't say at the top of there, but it's congratulations on your graduation. Success is the sum of small efforts repeated often. And this is how I worked throughout the course, just one day at a time, one dictation at a time. And I graduated with honors with a grade of 95.3%, which I feel is pretty impressive considering from where I started in the beginning and to where I graduated. And I mentioned previously, this speaks volumes about the chorus. So that's basically my story.
Wow, Lonnie, thank you for sharing your story. That's great. It's amazing how you have kept, and you've mentioned it, how you kept your sense of humor, and we can really appreciate, as you were talking, yeah, very inspiring.
Well,
Patty
thank you.
says, yeah, that's great. Yeah. So does anybody have any questions for Lonnie?
You're welcome, Marie.
Well, while they're thinking of a question for you, Lonnie, do you mind if I ask you a question?
No, fire away.
So I know that you mentioned that you had to work on your typing speed. Did you use any special programs or just typing yourself, like in
It
Word
was just
documents?
yeah, just typing myself, and it's actually from doing the chorus, it actually increased my speed. And by the time I had finished my chorus, I was up to 63. So, but in the beginning, it took me probably 3 days just to be able to hit that 40 mark, and I did it over and over and over again. So,
That's good.
so to answer Patty's question, what text expander do I use? I with the program that I use right now, it's called Acuity. Um, they use kind of a Word format. And what I do is I type everything in a Word document and then I transfer it over onto the document before I generate the letter and send it out. Um, and what I've done is I've gone into the Word document in the autocorrect settings. You can also create a shortcut key so that it gets to really fast and just start putting things into that. I do know that if Acuity Solutions is something that people are looking at, they also in the beginning use a Word document that you have to do your tests on. So having done that early on in the program and implementing it in that situation, it's people would just thrive. And if I had somebody tell me that in the very beginning, that's what I would have done. And I believe that I would probably still be with Acuity Solutions as a live scribe. Um, so that's kind of how I do my text expander now. I did finish the course within a year, and that was also taking probably about a month and a half off in the summertime.
That was actually my other question too, was what you used for a text expander. So that's good.
Yeah.
Um,
But you know, my thinking as I was going through the course and stuff like that, and even now, like I don't, even though I have some things in my text expander, I find that I'm just typing them out. And what that does is it just, you know, it may take a tiny bit longer, but it helps me with my spelling. And when I finally do my when I do my final proofread, it helps me out, you know, and that's just kind of what works for me. You know, what works for me might not work for everybody else. So I to
so
answer
Lonnie,
Bonnie's, yeah, I see that. To
yeah,
answer Bonnie's question there, I use the so with Word you have autocorrect, and you can go into your option settings and change where the autocorrect part is, and you can enter in whatever code you want to mean something else. You know, like if I wanted, I mean, you could even take it so far as to, if somebody says, I know, like with Acuity Solutions, just if they say runny nose, when I do my text expander, I like to use a double H first because you know there's nothing that starts with double H, and I would just put in HHRN, and and the word that you're replacing it with would pop up as rhinorrhea. So that's another way to make it go a little bit faster when it comes down to doing the live scribe stuff, because they do expect you to be very quick. And and because I wasn't very quick, I found that quite stressful for me. Yeah.
there's also a book out there, Saving Keystrokes. I don't remember who it's by, but she has a formula that she uses for her text expander formulas. And so, I mean, it's not for everybody. I kind of looked into it and then I thought, um, we all definitely have our own way that we prefer to do it. And so I kind of made up my own system for the text expander.
Yeah.
So that's great. I never
Yeah.
thought of using HH, but that's a really good idea.
Well, the one thing that I like about HH is your finger's right there. Right. That's that's
Yeah.
that's where your first finger is almost starting. Right. You know, if you are using proper, technique. And my thing is that, like, my pinkies don't listen to my brain. So I'm one of these people that only uses the 6 fingers instead of 8 fingers when I'm typing. So so that's, it's still a learning curve for me as well too. So, to answer Patty's question, do I use headphones regularly? Yes, I have about a half a dozen pairs of them. Because I am hearing impaired, I find that there are some tones that I'm not able to hear, And I've actually recently picked up a pair of Aftershock headphones. So they're a bone conduction headphones, and I'm actually able to wear my hearing aid while I wear that. And I love them. I mean, it's crystal clear. The only problem with them is they're not noise reduction. They won't block anything out. Charlotte, has it been challenging working from home? I would say for myself, no. I am a bit of a hermit. I have two teenage boys. The only challenging thing from working at home is getting bugged about every hour for two little dogs that need to go outside to go pee. But advice to staying on task. Um, uh, create a power hour, you know, as far as where you're going to sit down and that's going to be your focus. Nothing else in the home matters during that hour. You know, you don't need to worry about cooking. You don't need to worry about laundry, none of that stuff. And just concentrate on that. After that hour, take a 5 or 10 minute break and then go figure out what it, what it is you need to do and then come back to your computer again. And for me, when I took my course for applied psychology and counseling, that helped me create a better listening ear. It teaches you to be an active listener without responding, and by that, it teaches you just to simply listen. And I think that's one of the things as well that has helped me succeed in this industry.
Were there times you wanted to throw in the towel, Lonnie?
Oh yeah, weekly. Especially in the very beginning, I kept telling myself, and I feel like I'm an intelligent person. Yeah, there's times where I'd be just sitting on the couch. My wife come home from work, and how was your day? And don't talk to me, I just look at her, and I only got through two dictations today, and it took me all day, like so. Yeah, no, there was lots of times, and you just like I said, just gotta walk away, call it a day, and start again even the next day. It doesn't have to be that same day because sometimes it takes that day to what part of the program did I find the most challenging? I would say there's the surgical section, just because of all the research that had to go into it and learning all the different things. Um, and yeah, it's just a research thing. So that's good. 1 weekend and going well. Can't last forever. Nope. Like I said, it's designed to make you hear those tough dictators. And I believe I was talking to Leslie at one time throughout my course, and I said that you know. I'm trying to get perfect on them all. I said, well, if you started getting perfect on them all, we'd look at you funny and think you're cheating because there's no way you can. Just sometimes you can't hear it, right? You got to learn to know when to blank it out. So
That's right. Yeah. So I know that you talked about having whiteboards in your office. Did you actually make a word list as well on your computer through Excel or Word?
yes, actually, I took all of the handouts that were provided throughout the course and always worked on them as well. But there were some things that really went on the whiteboard, and even now, hard doctors' names and things like that. That was in the working industry. That's where I struggled a little bit was trying to figure out the doctors' names. And I mean, you can research all day long, but if you get one letter off on that doctor's name, it could come up with something that's totally different. So for me, that's where my struggle was a little bit with the doctors' names. And over time, that gets better. Um, just because of the simple fact of you hearing those names quite frequently.
That's right. I used to have sticky notes all around my computer, doctors' names and different words that I'd never heard before. But the
Yeah, well,
whiteboard was a great idea.
well, that's
Yeah.
what I like about the whiteboard because then you're not creating clutter. I have two little tiny sticker things on my one monitor. One says I am proud of you, and one says I love you, and those are from my wife, and they're only there because they came from her. But the whiteboard's nice because it's right beside you. I have mine to the right of my computer, and I just basically look over, and if there's anything that I need to remember or or just things that I want to stick a little bit better. Yeah, it's right there, and there's no clutter. And that's another thing, is keeping your area clean so that it's nothing that is distracting.
Bonnie agrees with you on the difficulty, on the most difficult chapter, probably surgical. And
Yeah.
one report at a time. Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On my PI exams, I did, I think my first one I got 98%. I got one wrong, and that infuriated me. I would have rather gotten two or three of them wrong instead of just one wrong, um, because I tend to try to be a bit of a perfectionist, and I have high expectations of myself. Like I mentioned, I am my own worst critic, but yeah, I did really well on my pies, and either got 100% or just got one wrong. And like I mentioned, I do not come from a medical background. Um, my whole life has always been about physical labor work, and so it really speaks testament to the program, and I really owe where I am to CanScribe, you know. Did I ever find myself procrastinating on something transcriptions as you did not want to get marked? When I self-graded my own, I know that I was extremely tough on myself. There's a lot of things that I self-graded that were more than likely not wrong, just different. Um, because when I would get my reports back that were graded by instructors, it's like, oh wow, I did a lot better than I thought. Um, and part of my New Year's resolution this year was to procrastinate a little bit less starting tomorrow. So that answers your question about procrastination.
Um, Courtney had a question if you had any tips for grammar practice and that type of thing.
Grammarly, I would say. Um, I had Grammarly running in the background a little bit, and this helped me because it'll show some differences as you're actually working through the thing. And Grammarly was a good place that I went to, and I struggled with grammar in the beginning too. I mean, you're definitely not alone if you're struggling on that. But just over time, and you know, overdoing 1,000 dictations, which is what the program offers. Um, it just all of a sudden it'll click. The comma eluded me forever. I still struggle. Like as well as the word follow up and differentiating it between a noun and a verb. That was something else too that took me a long time to actually figure out. So.
Speaking of commas, the account that you're working on now, do they follow the boss?
Actually, the funny thing is they don't have an account specific. So and and that was really, I thought that was really weird. They just basically said, oh, it's a verbatim account, but you can do whatever. And so we have actually kind of created our own, and we have done that by using what we have learned at CanScribe, because the other transcriptionist that is there is also a CanScribe graduate. So she is actually the lady that I know that worked for Acuity Solutions for over 5 years. So.
Patty says, I think I may spend a little too much time on the reports before I submit them too. I also do spend a great deal of time reviewing each report too. I guess that's how I learn.
It is how you learn, but I find that when I spend too much time on the reports, I overthink things, and that was my downfall. And that's, rather than just going with my gut and how I thought it was. If I had listened to my gut a little bit better rather than trying to pick it apart, um, that's when I started making the mistakes. Did I find the suggested 22 hours a week was about accurate and being able to complete the course in a year. Absolutely, yeah. Like I said, there was, there's some days that I would say if you put in your 22 hours a week, you'll actually finish it in less than a year. It all depends on how quickly you learn. I mean, all that stuff is all relative. So overthinking can relate. Yeah, yeah, overthinking. Yeah, see
Yeah,
Patty right there
that's right.
without fail.
Second guessing. Trust your gut.
Yep. I feel very hopeful now. Yeah, don't, don't let the chorus beat you down. Like I said in the very beginning, it's designed that way. It's designed to be tough. You start dealing with ESL dictators, and I mean, it took me forever to figure out the heading current clinical status. People with an Asian accent, it's Kansas. You can't figure that out. So it's and the funny thing is that, like I said, that one of the doctors that I have where I'm working now, she spoke exactly like that, and it's just like, wow, it was second nature for me to be able to understand her. Well, thank you, Patty.
Yes, Patty, that was a good story. Long journey, tough journey. So,
Yeah, it was definitely that. So, and I'm still struggling. I still have a hard time getting out of the house, still getting around. I haven't been on my motorbike, which I call the girlfriend, for ever since, I unloaded it off the truck. And that's one of my goals this year is to get back out there and, go for a ride. So,
Suzanne, I keep feeling like I can't put in enough time. So frustrating, but it sounds like you did put in a lot of time to help get past your difficulties. Yes, for sure.
yeah,
Yeah, and
absolutely.
I mean, if you can even put in, if you have an extra half an hour in the evening and sit down for half an hour, that little bit helps.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I put in about 5 hours a day. That was my goal, was 5 hours a day. And there was days where I still had to go and have a nap halfway through just because of feeling gassed and everything else. So for myself, Charlotte, I set my own schedule. I treat it like any other job. I start at 7 a.m. and I finish at 3:30. And I am 100% dedicated to it. I typically don't even take lunch, which is bad on me. But I do utilize, getting up every hour and letting my dogs out. So, and when I worked with MetaScribes, I could set my own hours. Actually, when I worked with MetaScribes, I was working 14 hours a day.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I'm not allowed to work that with this new job. Only 8 hours a day. That's it. So otherwise, I would, because I'm a bit of a workaholic. So
It's nice. It's nice to know that there's the work out there.
to answer Patty's question, yes.
Yes, so that's great. I guess we have about 10 minutes left. Oh, there you go. That's a good question, Charlotte.
Um, so I do know that Acuity Solutions, as a medical scribe, does offer benefits. When I worked with
Yep.
MetaScribes, it did not offer benefits. So I mean, it's either way. It's that's all relative to the research that you put into the company where you'd like to work. I know Acuity Solutions is a great place. Um, it for me at that time just wasn't conducive to my health. Like I found it was very fast paced in the beginning, and that's why I mentioned creating that text expander in the beginning, and and really concentrating on that, and understanding the difference between subjective and objective information, because that's what they want to see. That you have your basically everything gets typed in a subjective area as the appointment is going on, and then you are basically taking out of that subjective area and creating your objective, what's going on as far as the doctor examining the patient and things like that. So, and like I said, I know that they're hiring 200 scribes a month. So, and that's just the one company.
Yep.
So there's lots out there. So.
Yeah, and then there's for the foreseeable futures, we had Lisa Di Bernardino join us a couple weeks ago before Christmas.
Nice.
So yeah, that was some great information that she had about the scribes. So.
Okay, yeah, I didn't see that. Yeah, I know Lisa. So.
Yeah.
And Jennifer Courage is another one too.
So do we have any more questions for Lonnie today? I guess if not, we're almost at the hour. We could always, shut down for the day.
You're very welcome.
Are contracts available only in BC, as assuming BC residents? Or can you also apply to other provinces?
You can apply to other provinces. Like I said, I know that there's tons of work there. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually live in Saskatchewan myself, and when I was working as a transcriptionist, I was working for a company out in Ontario. So yeah, you can definitely, as long as you're Canadian, you can work for just about any province, in any province. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of other American companies, and even in Australia as well too, that hire Canadians.
That's right. Yep. There's a couple, I think, that hire Canadians.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome, Patty.
Yes. Yeah, okay. Well, I don't think there's any more questions. Lots of thank yous going out to Lonnie, and I just want to extend my own thank you as well for joining us today and sharing your story. That was a great story to hear. We really appreciate hearing, your honesty and yeah, it's great.
Well, thank you very much. And yeah, my honesty is a little bit raw sometimes, but it's just I don't have a whole lot of a filter. So, but and it was also, little does everybody know, it's more beneficial for me because it helps me with my anxiety issues. So I want to say thank you to everybody else for attending, just to help me that. So.
Yep. Well, we didn't have a hint that you had anxiety today. You did great.
No, thank you.